Alright everyone, today's video is checks, attack rolls, and saving throws. And it's going to be over the basic mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So the whole game works off of checks, right? And if you really break it down, a saving throw and an attack roll are just different types of checks, right? You call them a saving check and an attack check. If you really wanted to make things a little easier on yourself, you could call them that. But basically these checks, you're going to roll a d20. You will check and you will look and see if you're proficient with that kind of check. So if it's an ability check, you'll see if you have a skill proficiency or a tool proficiency. If it is a weapon attack or a spellcasting ability attack, you will check and see if you're proficient. You're proficient with all your spells, and you are proficient with the weapons that you have. It'll be listed on your character sheet. And then if it's a saving throw, you'll check and see if you're proficient. And you should start out with 2 as a character. It's related to your class by default, but I always give mine just 2 saving throws that they pick based on their character. I feel like that's a much easier for the DM because you don't have to look it up every time, and it's just not that illogical to have them pick their saving throws based on their backstory. So that's how you check if they're proficient, right? The first thing you do is you roll your d20, and then you check and see if they're proficient with that attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. If they are, you'll add the proficiency. And then finally, you'll find the ability score that you want to use for that check. So if it's a melee attack, you'll use strength. If it's a ranged attack like a longbow, you'll use dexterity. If it's casting a cantrip like firebolt, you'll use the spellcasting ability modifier, which for wizard intelligence. For a paladin, bard, sorcerer, or warlock, it's charisma, and for a ranger, druid, or cleric, it is wisdom. So you'll pick the spellcasting ability modifier, and you'll add that in. And that's how you determine the check. So step 1 is this an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw? Step 2 is to determine proficiency, right? If it's an ability check, make sure they have a tool proficiency or a skill proficiency. If they don't have those, they don't get proficiency. If it's a weapon attack or a cantrip, you will check and see if they have weapon proficiency, or if they know that cantrip. Because if they don't know the cantrip, they can't cast it at all. And finally, if it's a saving throw, you'll see if they have that saving throw proficiency, you know that proficiency. And then you pick the ability score you want it associated with, and you'll add that modifier. Now, the way you get the modifiers is very simple. You have the ability score, and it goes in series of 2. So at 20 and 21, it is +5. At 1918, it's +4. At 1716, it's +3. At 1514, it's +2. At 1312, it's +1. At 1110, it's +0. At 98, it's -1. And at 76, it's -2. And it goes on further beyond that, but you'll probably not run into too many modifiers below 6. I don't know of any monsters that actually have a modifier below 6, other than some beasts with their very low intelligence. But it's usually a mental trait that goes below 6. I don't think there's many physical traits that do. So that's how you figure out these checks, and you can use them in a lot of ways as the DM. If you first of all, for an ability check, I think these are highly underused by a lot of DMs, and if you can successfully implement these into your game, it makes everything so much more dynamic. Combats will be more creative. They will want to know more about the world. They'll be a lot more engaged, because if you give them a free check every turn, then they're encouraged to get bonus points. You know, they can cash in on using that check and say, okay, I want to try and do history to figure this out. I want to try and do arcana to see a weakness of this creature, and so on and so forth. And they can just keep trying for these things, and it makes them so much more engaged, so much more creative. And DMs talk all the time about players playing smart, but if you only give them the option of swinging their sword or use their full action for a check, they're really never going to try and use that full action for a check unless it's something that just dawned on them. But if you give it to them for free, that's much more encouraging them to use that check. And another really good thing is to kind of mix them up. You know, don't have religion every time you intelligence. Sometimes throw it in as charisma, like if it's a paladin, or if it's a cleric trying to call upon the wisdoms of the proverbs of their god, right? So you could have the skills mix and match. I think one of the best ones I've seen, it was an intelligence intimidation check. There was a librarian who would only give his knowledge to someone smarter than him, but the party was not smarter than him, so they had to intimidate him, and they had to bluff using their intelligence. So I think it was actually 1 intimidation and 1 deception, both using intelligence. So the more kind of ways that you can spice up these basic ability checks beyond just, okay, you roll for survival and you find the path, right? The more you can mix these up and give them creative uses, and that's why skill checks are so important. I'll probably have a video on skill checks soon, but that's why skill checks are so important, because it adds variety to the game and it enriches your game. Now for attack rolls, The attack roll is very simple and it's just a basic attack roll, but you could also have your grapples be attack rolls, or your trip attacks. You give all your players a trip attack, or you could give them a shove attack, right? So that just whatever you want to do, they'll just take that d20, they'll add proficiency if you want them to, and then they will add their either strength for a melee weapon, or for a thrown finesse weapon like a hand axe that runs off of strength. They'll add their dexterity for a ranged weapon or a melee weapon with finesse like a rapier or a longbow. And then if it is a spell, they will add their proficiency and their spell ability modifier of intelligence, charisma, or wisdom. Because there's no spell casting that runs off of Constitution, except for maybe a few subclasses run Constitution. I think maybe, but I think it's still UA. I don't think that's canon yet. And saving throws. So saving throws is everything, right? If they're jumping across the bridge and they slip and they need to make a saving throw to kind of catch themselves and make a successful jump, or if they need to dodge the volley of goblin arrows, that'd be a saving throw. So just, all these kinds of things are very useful to have, and we've gone over them all, right? So here's what you guys do. I want you to comment down below on some of the most creative ways your players have used their skills, or some of the most creative attacks that have happened, or some of the most critical saving throws, like something really crazy that happened. I want you to comment down below and go to my Discord and tell me what you think about that. I want you to share and subscribe so that everyone can see this video, because this is a useful guide for new DMs on a lot of critical information. So the more people see this, the more people are going to start DMing, and then we can kind of start an avalanche. And then a pro tip before I leave is have good useful lore that is built around your world that your players can dig up from history checks, because I think history is one of the least used checks, and it can be very useful to you in giving them tips and foreshadowing and kind of letting know things to come. With that, goodbye, good luck, and have fun in your games.